There are a couple different types of modifier errors that we're going to discuss, and you don't necessarily need to be able to recognize what type of modifier error is present. You are just going to have to mark on a test whether or not there is a modifier error. Does that make sense? So whether or not the sentence is correct or incorrect in its use of modifiers. But I am going to go over the different types of errors with you. All right, so the first type of modifier error, and I think probably the most common, is what we call misplaced modifier. And this is when you have a modifier, so an adjective or adverb, and more often than not, it's an adverb. They're just sneaky. They slip into the wrong space. So a modifier that is positioned in a sentence so that it is unclear which word, phrase, or clause is being modified. All right, so a modifier that's out of place or is causing confusion within the sentence. So let's look at a few examples. So in this sentence, Andrew watched the snow fall excitedly. The word excitedly is our culprit here. Again, those adverbs are slippery. So what sounds like is happening here is that the snow is falling excitedly, when really that word should be modifying how Andrew watched the snow. All right, so a correct version of that sentence would be Andrew excitedly watched the snow fall. Does that make sense? So getting the word right next to the word that it should be modifying. Another example, the man who spoke quickly ran out of breath. And here, the word quickly is our culprit, and what's confusing about this sentence is it the man who spoke quickly, as in he was speaking at a fast rate, or the man who spoke quickly ran out of breath. He ran out of breath at a fast rate. So that kind of confusion just isn't good for a sentence. You want to be clear with your words and with your meaning. So a better way to write this one, the correct version, the man who spoke ran out of breath quickly. And so we know that we're referring to the man who spoke and that he ran out of breath quickly, not that he spoke quickly. So adding clarity to your sentences. Another example, stretching across the yard, I saw a clothesline. And this one is kind of funny, gives you a funny image of a person stretching across the yard when what's actually stretching across the yard is not the person, it's a clothesline. So again, that idea of the modifier, in this case, the whole phrase, is misplaced. So the best way to correct that would be just to rearrange those phrases. I saw a clothesline stretching across the yard. Makes a lot more sense, a lot more clear. All right, so that's misplaced modifiers. Another common modifier error is called the dangling modifier. And maybe this is one that you've seen before or maybe have had corrected in an essay. So a dangling modifier is a word, phrase, or clause that does not modify any element in the sentence. Hence the word dangling. It's a modifier that's kind of hanging off the edge of a sentence. Usually dangling modifiers show up at the beginning, and it's not actually attached to any word or phrase in the sentence. So let me show you some examples. Courageously, the suspect was apprehended. All right, so our problem word here is courageously. So here's the question, was the suspect courageous? No. So that word shouldn't be attached to the suspect. Who was courageous in the sentence? Well, we assume it is whomever actually apprehended the suspect, but that person doesn't show up in the sentence, hence the confusion. So to correct this one, you really would have to completely rewrite it. The suspect was apprehended by the courageous policeman. Or you could say the courageous policeman apprehended the suspect. So there are a couple different ways you could correct that, but you want to make sure that the word courageous or courageously is connected to the person who actually was courageous in that sentence. Another example, having missed classes for a month, my grades were in jeopardy. And this is where you really have to think about accuracy. Did my grades miss classes for a month? No, grades don't attend class. That doesn't make sense. Who missed classes for a month? Well, I did. Am I present in this sentence? No. So that whole phrase, having missed classes for a month, is dangling. It has nothing to attach to. So to correct this one, you would add yourself into the sentence. Having missed classes for a month, I realized my grades were in jeopardy. You see how much more clear that is? Much more accurate. Another example. Flying over Detroit, the Canadian border appeared part of the city. And so here, sometimes a lot of these are funny. So can the Canadian border fly over Detroit? No, that's not physically possible. So who is flying over Detroit, or what? Well, some person is, but that person isn't actually part of this sentence. So that phrase, flying over Detroit, has nothing to latch on to. So again, you would have to rewrite this one. While flying over Detroit, I thought the Canadian border appeared part of the city. So putting the actual person that's being modified in the sentence, giving that modifying clause phrase something to latch onto, is going to make a lot more sense. All right, so those are dangling modifiers. And then finally, we have a particular type of modifier errors that is called a split infinitive. Now, a split infinitive, and I know we've talked about this, an infinitive is to plus a verb. At least I think we've talked about it. So this can be defined anytime a modifier is used to separate a to be verb. So to run, to swim, to eat. You want to keep that to and verb together and not split them with any kind of modifier. So here's an example. President Lincoln expected the North to quickly and decisively win the war. So you can see that the infinitive to win has been separated by the words quickly and decisively. And that's just considered poor style. You want to keep the to and the verb together. So a better way to phrase this would be, President Lincoln expected the North to win the war quickly and decisively. So you can move those adverbs to a different place in the sentence where you are not splitting that infinitive. Another one that pops up pretty commonly, and so I want to give an example on it, is when you have a negative, to never or to not. So words like never or not showing up between to and a verb, and that's often problematic in student writing. So in this example, Harry's teacher told him to never look back on his decisions. So you want to keep to and look together. So where do you put that never? It's usually best to put the not or the never in front of the verb. So Harry's teacher told him never to look back on his decisions. See how much smoother that flows? Again, this is just one of those grammar rules that a lot of professional authors will break. They'll split their infinitives. But when you're in freshman English class, we want you to be able to keep your infinitives together and move those other words to the side. So those to plus a verb are right together. All right, and then just for kicks, I think I mentioned this to y'all in class last week. I do have some funny examples that I've collected from essays over the years. The baby was delivered, the cord clamped and cut, and handed to the doctor, who breathed and cried immediately. So that last phrase should be attached to the baby, not to the doctor. But it's kind of a funny image, the doctor breathing and crying immediately after the baby was born, because it's possible. Here's another one. Only people with cars that live in dorms should be allowed to park in those lots. Well, I guess if your car lives in a dorm, then you must be pretty special if your car has its own dormitories. So, again, does that make sense? A lot of times these misplaced modifiers can cause some humor, some confusion. My cousin went on and on describing the details of her wedding in the elevator. Well, I don't know, maybe weddings and elevators, that's a new thing. Somebody's Pinterest board about a wedding in an elevator. But again, you get the idea. I'll give you a couple more funny examples and we'll wrap it up. I found my missing glove cleaning my room. Well, if I had a glove that could clean my room, then I would be overjoyed because I wouldn't have to do it anymore. The smoke alarm went off while cooking my dinner. Again, these inanimate objects doing jobs. If I had a smoke alarm that could cook my dinner, I would think that was the best thing ever. This is my favorite visual. I sent a poster to Mom rolled in a tube. Well, why is Mom rolled in a tube? What, like, does she like being in a tube? That just seems unfortunate for Mom to be rolled up in a tube. Don't try to pat the dog on the porch that is growling. I don't think I'd go anywhere near a porch that was growling. Porches that growl seem a little sinister and perhaps something that you should stay away from in general. All right, so thanks for sticking with me. I'm going to have another video up on prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections, but hopefully that helped you understand modifier errors.